Good evening, good evening. We are all getting awakened to be here for our sleep webinar.
Howdy, howdy, everybody.
Hello,
Mollie
hello.
Eastman, nice to be with you guys. Uh,
Yeah.
this is an exciting one we have for everybody. I guess we're dreaming big tonight. We're all up in our
So many
attire.
puns.
What we, I mean, you're probably full of them. We're going to hear about them through the next hour. I'm really sure.
Oh,
But are sleep habits killing you? That's the nature of tonight's discussion. And here's what's interesting. I don't know how many people here knew this, but chronic lack of sleep can more than double your risk of mortality from all causes. So sleep deprivation doesn't just impact your productivity or your alertness or your focus or your attention. It affects brain health at the deepest level, hormone balance, even your lifespan. So to help us explore the science and solutions for better sleep, we have an extraordinary guest, Mollie Eastman, with us tonight, founder of Sleep is a Skill. Mollie's transformed her insomnia journey into a global mission, sharing actionable strategies to make restorative sleep a skill that anyone can master. So I know we've got a bunch of clinicians with us tonight. We've got individuals that have done their DNA test. They know their clock gene, their detox genes, their methylation pathways. So whether you're struggling to fall asleep, stay asleep, or wake up refreshed and get at it every day, today's discussion is going to help equip you with personalized science-backed strategies for sleep optimization. And of course, everyone here knows that sleep is one of the most important things that we get right. But why? So we should just dive right in. Everyone knows Dr. Stephanie Nielsen. I'm Bryce Wylde, co-founder and chief of innovations at the DNA company. Just a bit of housekeeping. Mollie will be departing. She's got a hard stop, top of the hour. But Dr. Stephanie and I will continue to hang around for another half hour to answer any and all of your questions. Have a wonderful experience, everybody. Mollie, let's start right there at the top with your own personal experience and motivation. And by the way, I'm going to take this off now. I said I'd sort of do that for the introduction, but that's just going to be
I'm
terrible to
staying
look
in my
so
pajamas.
yes, I love that. So
Dr.
good.
Dr. Nielsen's in the spirit. But yeah, what was your impetus? I mean, let's start there. How did you
Yeah.
become the consummate expert?
Yeah, it was from my own hard-won journey with my sleep. And what that looked like was just kind of it was a period of time where, as a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends, I just had a lot of labels and narratives with my sleep. I would say things like, I'm a short sleeper, I'm a night owl, it's in my genes, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And it wasn't really until I went through this whole period of insomnia that completely transformed my life. And it had me go down the rabbit hole to understand what could I do to transform this area. Unfortunately, when I went to the doctors, I left with a series of different types of sleeping pills. And, that's not supposed to be first line treatment, but that's what it looked like for me. And turns out that there's a whole other world available. So what I would say is there's a lot that we can do to really transform this area. And for me, it was really a period of time where I figured out I have got to figure this out myself.
That makes good sense. And you didn't just sort of proceed to magazines and the latest on the internet. You became incredibly dedicated. I mean, it's a deep science, and you've mastered it. What was that part of the exploration? How did you become the go-to sleep expert?
Yeah. So, I mean, with sleep as a skill, it really became learning about circadian rhythm entrainment and what life looks like when you really put when you schedule your life to match the rhythms of nature. So, sunlight, darkness, and what can become available with that.
Yeah, makes sense. I feel like, I don't know, Dr. Nielsen, what do you think about we start at, the very top of the science of sleep. Mollie does this incredible exploration or description of the stages. People think, for example, misunderstood that REM and dream stage is somehow the deepest. So what do you think? Should we go through like the architecture? Should we start there?
I would love that because I think a lot of people think they know about sleep, but they don't really understand sleep. So I would love for you to peel back some of those layers. We have a very sophisticated audience, as you well know, that loves to dig into their own genes, dig into, ways that remedies that they can do, whether they're habits, whether they're, devices that they can do. I'd love to get in at some point to some of the devices, but really let's kind of break down what is sleep, and what do we need to get so that we can optimize our health and healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of the people we work with are wearing different wearables. So we do look and we hear a lot of people saying things like, I want to improve my deep sleep. I want to improve my REM. But without really understanding one, the what that looks like to the metrics by which they're pulling from that. So the different wearables, are those really accurate when we talk about sleep stages? And I would argue that unfortunately the sleep stage classifications on a lot of those wearables are not the best. And even when you go into a sleep lab, the agreement there commonly is really only in around the 80s, kind of mid 80s percentage as far as the accuracy on those sleep stage classifications. So if a lot of people are really saying, oh, I've got to get this certain particular amount, I would encourage them to maybe look at some other metrics too, understanding, of course, that these are crucial and we want to make sure that we're cultivating and supporting for proper deep sleep, proper REM, not just kind of stepping over light, but understanding that there are a lot of other facets that go into getting great sleep. And what I would also put in is just on the most basic of terms, if you're thinking about when you get deep and REM, it really breaks down to the first half of the night being more deep sleep rich, the second half of the night being more REM rich. And of course, you're rotating it throughout these sleep cycles and going through these different ratios. But just on the bare minimum, one of the most important things people could get out of this conversation is simply to begin having a strong level of consistency with their sleep. And so say if you now are developing really strong consistency, then you'll know if you do start staying up too late into the evening, then what are you lobbing off? You're lobbing off more of that deep sleep on the first half. If you do the inverse on the other side and you wake up too early, what are you lobbing off there? More REM sleep. And so with each one, if we're talking about deep sleep has become into more conversation more recently. Why? Because in around 2012, lymphatic drainage with a G was discovered or understood that this could be an area that's all about that cleansing of the brain, kind of that super soaking, if you will, of the brain, and really helping to support that we believe there can be some connections with that strong deep sleep ability and our ability to stave off things like neurodegenerative disorders. So Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, et cetera, seems to be linked. And so if we are consistently cutting back on that deep sleep time or doing things that could be impacting our ability to get into that deep sleep on the first half of the night, that could be problematic. Now, in the second half of the night, as we move over into more REM, you can almost think of this as sort of your inner therapist, your ability to emotionally regulate throughout the course of the night. And, so I do hesitate. I know that our kind of title for this is Are Your Sleep Habits Killing You? And that's so important because for so many people, we might not be prioritizing our sleep, or we might not know of some of the things that we might be doing to impact our sleep. But for those of us who have dealt with insomnia, they might be kind of on the other side of things, and now they're trying everything to sleep and really, really struggling. And so sometimes the fears can even make things worse. So if that is someone listening, or if are working with someone that's dealing with that, it's this weird juxtaposition of also cultivating a strong desire to support your sleep, but also this weird ability to take your hands off the reins and support the acceptance of sleep when it's not working as well as it could. But part of that is going to be about getting proper REM so that we do have that inner therapist and those kind of abilities to manage that emotional regulation as well.
Well, you bring up such an important point because within our DNA 360, our the mothership test, if you will, we are quite proud of our mood behavior executive function panel, where we look at genes like COMT, catechol-methyltransferase, pair that with some insights into sleep with ADRA2B, and for that matter, how your DRD2, your dopamine gene that encodes, the patterning, if you will, of the dopamine receptors. But these three genes in particular, and the clock gene that we look at, and even the detox genes relevant to lymphatics, as you're describing, they can really easily and well define whether somebody's got that hamster wheel, whether or not they've got that rumination predisposition. Because as you're putting it, the title was somewhat born, by the way, in this, in light of statistics, which I know you know. In fact, maybe you should describe these. When we change the clock, even by an hour, we see an increase in car accidents and ER presentations with cardiomyopathies that, or heart attacks and all kinds of different things. I mean, this is a real, that's an accentuation on a change of 1 hour. And I think we should abolish time changes. By the way,
I agree. Oh my gosh.
But anxiety
to raise the roof.
People with anxiety and stress phenom and correlated issues, they need probably even more of that first phase deep sleep, do they not? I mean, in order to recover, because this is what we're talking about, is like pushing the big red reset button is essentially what sleep is. Correct? Yes.
Totally. It is pushing the big red reset button. And that's the thing too. We're looking to cultivate a proper breakdown of both stages. And when I'm focusing in on this conversation with deep and REM, but of course, light stages of sleep are all crucial too. But when we think about the ratios, I see a lot of people getting fixated on the numbers, and they'll say things like, well, I've got to get 25% of deep and, 20, whatever of REM. But it does turn out that the body and the mind is really, really brilliant in its ability to go after what it does need, and it will be dynamic on different nights. So what you get one night is going to be dependent on what you got previous nights. And not only that, but how you're managing yourself by day. So if you are just ran a marathon, your body might go after different types of sleep than if you just lost a loved one or something and you're processing something significant from a psychological aspect. So just also realizing that we're not robots and that we shouldn't be striving for something that's not real, that is about like some sort of exact ratio every single night, because it shouldn't really look like that. It should go after what it needs. If your house is a mess, and you've got certain areas that you really need to focus on, you would focus on those, not just blankly clean the whole place for no good reason.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So where do you recommend that people start? Because, we've got our poll, and maybe we should pull up our poll right now and look at some of our answers. So if we have our little magic, there we go. So it's how many hours of sleep do you typically get in a night? There's a few people that get 4 or less. I actually know a few people in my circle that do that. 4 to 6, 45%, 6 to 8, 43%, and more than 8, 2%. So Mollie, what do you see with most of the clients that you work with? Where are they fall in this spectrum? Are they in the 4 to 6, the 6 to 8, or less than 4?
Good question. Well, first off, I will say that the groups I'm working with might be a little skewed because they're coming to me to, help support their sleep. But I would say most of them are sleeping, like they're getting, say, somewhere in that 6 to 8 hour range, is a common one that I'm seeing, although there will be periods of sometimes like acute periods where they're getting less. But ultimately, what we do is we also want to focus in on what is the quality of that sleep, what's the consistency of that sleep. So what I would say is, no matter where people are falling right now, we want to make sure that your sleep need is being met. And how do we figure out your sleep need? Well, a couple things that we can do is, one, start bringing in 2 key anchors that I like to have people begin with. One is their consistent wake up time. And this is a big deal because in the beginning, for a lot of people, this is, can be an annoying thing. And so it can take a few weeks before it kind of just becomes more consistent and they actually, step into this. But ultimately, that consistent wake up time over time, what kind of shakes out is what your consistent sleep need is going to look like. It's assuming that we're getting rid of some of that kryptonite, some of the things that might be really hitting at your sleep. So alcohols, THC, certain stressors, eating late, certain things that might be really messing with the quality of that sleep. And then, of course, making sure that we're not stepping over sleep disorders, because there are over 100 sleep-wake disorders. Many people are running over 100. I'll say that again, over 100 sleep-wake disorders. And many people are running around undiagnosed, unfortunately, or untreated, even if they are diagnosed. And so that, I've seen people that have, for instance, commonly sleep apnea. They might be sleeping 8, 9 hours, but the quality of that sleep is just abysmal depending on the severity. So we want to get even more granular with the hours that people are getting, making sure that we're really, really hitting on supporting that it's less of that fragmentation, because that's a big thing that we're seeing throughout the course of the night for a lot of people. But commonly, that consistency piece of that consistent sleep wake up time is going to really help make a difference. And so that's one anchor item that we have people begin with. One of the second anchor items that we have people begin with is consistent light dark exposure. And so this just can really help to structure everything else that we're going to bring in. So meaning, when we start talking about your meal timing, when we start talking about thought timing, kind of down regulation things in the evening, all these aspects of what go into getting great sleep, we have a blueprint suddenly available when we align with the rhythms of nature. So that light dark from that circadian perspective, and then that consistent wake time is really going to help sturdy the ship right out of the gate, and then we can further optimize.
Well,
I
it's
mean,
interesting. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
oh, no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and it's interesting because when we look at our poll again, it
Yeah.
was, do you have trouble falling asleep, staying
Yes.
asleep, feeling rested, or the
Totally.
consistency pattern? So 15% of our audience is having trouble falling asleep. For 54%, it's the staying asleep. I think it's,
Yes.
I can get to bed and then I wake up in the middle of the night and it's like, what do I do? Then 14% is feeling rested. They may sleep, but they wake up not feeling rested. And then 17% is managing that consistent scale. And I will tell you that tonight, 85% of our audience is 55 or older. So if that helps us target things that you have
Yes.
seen in that population, and for things for them to look for or things that we can put in place, I think they would be thrilled to hear from that. I did see one question that says, are you going to scare us and tell us how horrible it is? No, we're not. What we're going to do is give you some consistent things for you to look at, some consistent things for you to practice. And we're going to make sure you know how to get a hold of Mollie and how you make sure that you can get a hold of us so we can help you work through some of those things. So
I have to argue this point. I'm pretty sure I'd get some backing from this room. This point, no, not that point. A point in general
okay.
that I feel like we can change the day we die by adopting optimal sleep hygiene and habits.
Totally.
Because it's not just the hours you clock on the pillow, right? I know I've heard you say that before. It's the quality depth of sleep. By the way, I follow you on social media, have for a while, and I don't know where you were in the world, but somewhere I think way out west, I can't remember. And you were annoyed because it was now dark and you'd forgotten your blue blockers somewhere. Oh. This isn't that right? Yes. This isn't a biohack. That was you, correct? Yeah. I follow a bunch of, but this isn't the latest sort of biohacking fad to walk around like Dave Asprey with yellow glasses. There's a real thing to managing your day-night cycle with this hyper exposure of blue light that we're all experiencing now, right?
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh. And yeah, I'm always very bummed when I just was in Cabo and I lost my blue blockers, which was such a bummer. Yes, exactly. And for people listening too, they might have heard conflicting reports around the effectiveness of blue blockers. And if they have heard that, commonly some of the studies that might have been done might be on clear blue blockers, which are distinct from the orange or red lenses. And you can test these to see their effectiveness simply by looking at something that is a blue light source and then putting these on. And if they are blocking that blue, if you really can't see that blue, then they're effective. If you can still see the blue, then obviously we've got some work to do. But as far as really managing our light-dark cycles, there's often more that goes into it than we might imagine. But if we take the time to learn about it, set it up for our environment, then often it's pretty affordable, and then you're set from that point on. But what this often looks like is really creating an environment of brighter days and darker nights. So brighter days, darker nights. How do you do that? Well, one, you want to understand more the physics of light. So the windows behind me, if I was to only get my light source from behind these windows, it would really be an insufficient kind of spectrum of light. So we want to make sure that we're physically getting outside to get that unadulterated light. And then we want to be doing that as frequently as often as we can. And part of this, one of the most popular podcasts we had last year was with Dr. Sachin Panda out of the Salk Institute. And one of the things that his group found was that you're needing to get sufficient bright light exposure outside to create melatonin in the evening, which is confusing for a lot of people, right? So it's like, right, why would we need bright light exposure to create the hormone of darkness? And it turns out it gets layered, and we're discovering more about maybe now we're not just creating melatonin from a brain-based phenomenon. Now there's this mitochondrial-based melatonin production from subcellular melatonin production. But part of this needing the presence of bright light. So the shakeout of the practical takeaways from this in their lab found that you're looking to get about an hour of bright light exposure each day to create sufficient melatonin production at night. This is a problem considering the average person is getting around 93% of their time is spent indoors. And that was out of 2001 stats. So what's likely is that it's even worse now. So most people are not getting that sufficient bright light exposure to make that melatonin that they'll need in the evening. But then augment this, take this another step further. In order to make that melatonin properly, then in the evening and change over to that, we do need the presence of proper darkness for an extended period of time. And most of us are turning on faux artificial lights at night. And this is creating a big, big problem, especially because of the type of lights that we're using. Many people are using LED-rich lights, and those are very rich in blue band light sourcing from the wavelengths of light. So instead, we want to be shifting over to more amber or fire toned type lights, red lights, etc., to really then ensure that we're not depleting that melatonin production. I mean, certain studies point to wild things, like one found that around 30 minutes in ordinary room lighting, depleting melatonin production in participants by up to 90% by just simply a short period of time. And it does depend on the brightness of the light and the sensitivity of the participants. There's a lot that goes into it, but the takeaway is I think most people don't realize just how much that this light and the absence of light is a drug and creates a drug-like effect.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is at the Huberman lab, but it's the inferior, that first morning sun exposure or light exposure to the inferior aspect of our retina. So like how we've evolved, the sun's kind of, it's in the,
the
it's
angle.
in the distant horizon. Right. Yeah. And that sets the stage for, by the way, off camera, I think Dr. Nielsen's invented a new term here. I'm not quite sure, but melatonipause. I don't even know if that's a thing, but it was hilarious to hear.
Well, no, I was working with some people, and we were talking about menopause, because I do a lot of hormones, and andropause. But now there almost seems to be a melatonopause, that we are losing our melatonin. And there are so many people that have a fear of supplementing. Yeah. So they need, and I love that you're bringing this up. There is a whole light medicine, dark medicine. So for our audience, you must get, did you hear this? An hour of unfiltered sunlight a day. I don't care if it's 15 minutes first thing in the morning with your cup of coffee. Even if it's a cold day, get outside for a little bit. I don't care if it's a walk. I don't care if it's, in the afternoon. Earlier the better, longer the better. So get up and move in the morning. Okay, but that light exposure is your first solution to increasing that melatonin naturally. Then nighttime, we actually have a darkness deficiency because there's all this light going on, because we have all this exposure to TVs and computers and cell phones and whatever. Okay, you've got to get off of those, and you've got to make your room cool and dark. Your body's got to be prepared. And I love, Mollie, that you were talking about how our ancestors used to live. They went to bed when it was dark, they got up when it was light. Okay. And
Totally.
so we've got to get back to that. And people who say, well, I'm a night owl, I come alive at night. Well, then you've got a whole cortisol and diurnal dysregulation, and we'll maybe get in touch into some of that. But a lot of what we need to realize to begin with, there are inexpensive, highly effective things you can do. Get out in the sun in the morning and get in the dark at night.
Mm.
So great first steps.
Fantastic. And don't underestimate the power of this and the cumulative effects of this, and then how it can spill over into things like one of the categories that I talk to people around is called, that I like to refer to as thought timing, so that we can still bring in the timing aspect of the types of thoughts that we're engaging in. But even setting those proper light signals will actually impact the types of thoughts you're having, which is really fascinating. So being outside under the sunlight, we know that that tends to help support kind of these feel good effects and feel good hormones from a serotonin, or from a if we're talking about serotonin and dopamine, we do see that that seems to be elicited from that sunlight exposure. And then in the evening, if we're present to that darkness, that can help support that melatonin pulse and counteracting that cortisol pulse. And so that's going to impact the tone of the types of thoughts that you're engaging in. So all of this just kind of supports our goals with downregulation in the evening, which is often something we're trying to support for great sleep.
Now, a lot of people are doing red light therapy right now. How is red light therapy going to impact our whole light exposure stuff?
Yeah, well, you might, if you're watching this video, you might see that in the background, sunset is starting to occur here in Austin. So you can see this pinky hue, and this pinky hue is an example of this infrared light that's present in sunrise and sunset. And it's present, throughout the course of the day, but particularly when we talk about infrared, we're talking about these pinky times to really get free red light exposure. If you are to go outside, you can get that present, and that's that kind of healing effect. Part of, and not from a woo perspective, but from a measurable perspective, like so NASA was part of the original kind of pioneers, I guess you could say, around red light to understand for wound healing years ago. But since then, it's almost become somewhat like a panacea, where you'll see like this whole rundown of all these things that people will talk to as far as the effects of red light therapy. But really, it's getting into some of the effects that you can see that are present if you just are getting yourselves outside, especially during that sunrise and sunset, to get extra shots of that. But, and if you are to then purchase red light therapies in various capacities, you can also have some of those advantages. So some of the things that we'll see for people, lowering of inflammation, can be great for pain management. I mentioned the wound healing piece, mitochondrial health, anti-aging. There's a lot of things that can kind of take place with the use of red light therapy. And so as far as timing, because I think I saw that on the chat, there's a few things. Now, I would say that often throughout the whole course of the day, there can be lots of benefits to using red light therapy. The only call out that I would say, if we're trying to really align with the rhythms of nature, knowing that some of these panels can be very, very bright. And so if you're doing this in the evening, then it can be sort of wake promoting to have these red light panels going late in the evening. So that might be a time where you want to abstain, or certainly ensure that you're not staring right into these panels, because I've tested some of these, and some of them will get to like, 3,000 lux or certain very high numbers. So that can just be counter to what we're trying to cultivate, because you want to remember that our body has trillions of clocks in every cell and organ and tissue in our body, and they're looking to stay on time. And so part of our responsibility is to feed them the right signals and cues to know what time it is and what to be doing when. And if we are giving those confusing light signals, that can be one aspect that can be kind of throw us off.
So when we talk about confusing light signals, let's talk about places like the Pacific Northwest or Alaska or other countries that have terminal darkness during parts of the year. So how are they to manage? What are you recommending there?
I love that. So I will say that this is a time where we can start to bring in some modern advancements, right, to help support that. So what we often do is a few things. So if we're in certainly like northern latitude locations where we might be deficient in a lot of bright light throughout the course of the day, or during certain periods of the year. And so what we can do are a few things. One, I like for people to know about vitamin D lamp sources. So one is Spurdy lamp, and that got a lot of popularity during COVID. So you can actually make vitamin D from a light source, which is pretty novel or interesting. Another one is Chroma D, and that one's cut with more red light. So that even has other benefits as well. But those can be really valuable because one of the things that we commonly see in those locations can be lots of vitamin D deficiency. So you can make sure that you're properly getting sufficient vitamin D that is going to be part of that kind of cocktail of vitamin D to serotonin to melatonin, and making sure that we're not missing something there. You can also invest in different types of light sources that can mimic as much of what's going on outside or what we'd like to have going on outside, kind of proper light dark 2 parts to our day. So one that I do like that's kind of newer is called Skyview. And that one is designed by a former, I want to say NASA subject light matter expert out of NASA. And so Skyview is aiming to really help align us with these rhythms and giving those full wavelengths as much as possible indoors. And there's other brands that are trying to do this too. And I've, no affiliation with this, but looking to see how can you tell your body what time it is and what to be doing when inside, even when it's totally dark or totally light and for long stretches of time. So you want bright days, dark nights, even if it's going to be artificial. But please, if you are doing that, one of the things we do tend to see is that many of these are very bright, like blue light heavy. So if you can balance that with more of that red light so that you're not devoid of that, that can really help make a difference.
I tend to default to evolutionary biology when it's a complex systems, thing like sleep. The work of Richard Dawkins comes to mind, or Stephen Jay Gould. But whenever I think circadian rhythm, I always go back to these, studies in the 70s, 80s, some NASA done, but where they put human subjects in a dark cave, and how our circadian rhythms default to longer than 24 hours, maybe even approaching 25 hours, right? And these are, first of all, why does that even happen? And it's a lead up to a question. We got to get you answering some of the questions in our chat, because these are really cool ones.
Yeah, sure.
But and then we'll answer, at the top of the hour when you got to jump.
I know. And the only call out was that it's at the 50-minute mark. Is that still okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Whenever you got to go, you go. We'll sweep up the mess.
Okay. Oh.
So no, but the question, it's an interesting question, but it's a lead up. So what's the latest around why our circadian rhythms, if left untouched or rather manipulated in a dark cave, ends up leaning toward more of a 25-hour?
Yeah. So those were done back in, I believe, the Kentucky caves in the kind of early part of the 1900s, and understand it's really like landmark research and put sleep science on the map. If you want to learn more about this, there's a great book called Mapping the Darkness that just kind of came out more recently. Fantastic name, very cool. But you can learn much more about the history of this. But what I would say is it appears to just help us understand more and more of the need for those light dark signaling, because if that is all present, that is what helps us keep on time. And what I would extract from personally, what I would extract from some of the importance of those studies is that when we do put ourselves into situations that are really not livable for human beings, like if we're talking about like kind of this ancestral wisdom, then never would we just be in dark caves all day, every day and expect to thrive and what have you. So instead, what we want to mimic is what are we seeing kind of modern hunter-gatherer tribes doing now? So we had a sleep anthropologist that studied the Hadza tribe out of Africa and studied their sleep patterns. And they found that they're incredibly, of course, aligned with these rhythms of nature because they're outside all day and night. And the alignment with those rhythms really takes care of a lot of this. So everything that we're kind of talking about, it's kind of gets handled if you move yourself outside and fully live out in nature in a lot of ways. But many of us are not going to do that. So if we're not going to do that, then how can we mimic these things?
Right.
But that's what I'd say is it's a perfect example, what you shared, the cave studies, because then we see when we remove ourselves from the workable rhythms of nature, we start to go awry. And there can be differences in different people because that's why, kind of circadian rhythm, it's around 24 hours. So some people are a little bit more, some people are a little bit less. But they're part of what helps anchor this is that light dark.
Right. So, and here's the question, and it's a cool one because we deal with those systems, but we also deal with these microsystems within the month. So Nora Monet is asking, and maybe because her DNA is partly werewolf, why is my sleep always disrupted several days before and after a full moon? And is there anything I can do about it? You mentioned it's not just wavelength, there's lux involved, right?
Yeah.
There's lumen, or let's say light intensity. So is she being affected by the actual physical, brightness by the moon, perhaps? Or what other, is there moon cycles that affect people for other reasons that we don't know?
Yeah, such a good question. Now, I would say I would want to spend more time with people that are seeing some of those changes because I'd want to get in and see if there's other things at play. But I will say, and I say that just because we have a really large database of Oura Ring users, and so we often just see how many things can affect sleep. So there can be a lot of variables there. But I would say there's a lot of history as it relates to the lunar cycles and how they affect both sleep and even mental health. Like, so lunatic is partly derived from lunar. And so the kind of acting out of normal behavior when things are changing like that with those rhythms. And then so we do tend to see that especially if people are truly really linked up with those the ability to have some of that moonlight in their space. So maybe if it is keeping them up a bit, we know that very low amount of lux while you're sleeping in your bed um, can be disruptive of sleep, and even surprising things like blood sugar regulation and all kinds of things can go awry. And we're talking often in some of these studies, just really, really low outputs. So even under like 10 lux, certainly under 100 lux. So I would say for that person, if some of that moonlight is getting into their space and then kind of just a little bit more activating, more bright than normal, then that could certainly impact their sleep. Now you could get into other approaches. Some people talk about parasites and moons.
I
Some
was
people,
just going to say,
right?
between guts and parasites and hatching, and absolutely,
There's
right
a lot
all
of
in, baby.
variables. Yeah, exactly. And so for so long for women of menstruating age, then there was kind of, it's appeared to be some syncing with the rhythms of nature. So there's a lot there. But that's why I'd also just say that I really believe this conversation of sleep being a skill set is so interesting because as you really learn some of what is kind of count onable for you with your sleep, then you'll start to notice some of these variables and very well might be accurate that some people are seeing some of those changes with the cycles of the moon. So, when you learn about yourself, you can take some action there.
Besides sleep hygiene, the obvious, making sure the room is as dark as possible, cool. I think most studies are showing between 64 and 68 degrees, quiet, maybe making sure your mattress is comfortable. Are there, in your opinion anyways, is there science and evidence suggesting that there is an array of supplementation from melatonin to 5-hydroxytryptophan to tryptophan itself to maybe the B complexes that people can do to maybe up their sleep or improve their quality?
Yeah, good questions. What I would say is yes, there very well may be supplementation that people could utilize for their sleep. But commonly, I would say it tends to be one of the way down the road things that we personally might be addressing at Sleep as a Skill, just because we find that some of the big heavy hitters are often more behavioral, environmental, or even inner environment. So like kind of our stress load management, our thoughts, all kinds of things going on there. And especially when we're talking about insomnia, like, good luck having some of these sleep stacks really making a difference with insomnia if you're really in a hyper aroused state. And it's not to put, I'm not blanketing, because there can be such power if we identify and find out what are some of the imbalances that each person is dealing with, can totally be game changing. But often I find that takes some of the great work that you all are doing of testing and getting more granular and bio individual, so that we're not kind of just blanket using some of these things. And sometimes even being problematic. Like I have seen for some people that they might take certain types of supplements and they might have kind of paradoxical effects for them because they're not doing the work that you all are pointing to, that can really help identify for them.
The worst thing I hear, by the way, is like nails on a chalkboard. Is sitting in. I travel a lot as well, but sitting in an airport lounge, or even at the gate, and hearing people say, "Oh, we're about to get on a plane. Let's take our melatonin." And I swear, I've gone up to at least 3 different individuals and said, "That's not how you take melatonin. It's about half an hour if it's going to work for you." And by the way, that's what we do at the DNA company. We do these tests to determine what your clock gene is and what your 5-HTTL-PR gene is. I mean, PGX testing as well, pharmacogenomics, to know whether or not certain drugs are right for you, not just for mood behavior, but also sleep. There are some that are totally contraindicated, making things worse, and that's in your DNA. But, I've gone up to these people and I've said, no, 1 to 3 milligrams per 50 pounds of body weight taken about half an hour before intended sleep time in that new market for 2 or 3 days. That's how you do it. That's the reset. But there was this other, we would be so remiss if we didn't, at least in the last 5 minutes here, pick your brain. I mean, there's so many questions we both have, but on the latest around apnea. But I know, and you're not a sleep doctor, apnea specialist, but the latest science around even subclinical or even atypical apnea and how many people this is affecting. I mean, correlated to, of course, our obesity epidemic. But what I mean are like, the non-suspect, like thin, active people that are suffering from apnea.
Oh my gosh. So I will just say I'm very biased on this, but I will put my, kind of flag, down, that I really believe that I would like to see a future where every person is tested for sleep disorders, not just once, but multiple times. The same way we wouldn't just, test a person's blood pressure one time and then make all these, kind of treatment plans around that. You would understand that it's dynamic. Same rules apply with things like apnea. And same rules apply for the fact that maybe that person that was tested 10 years ago was more slender or what have you, or had different hormone kind of panels at the time, or even laxity so the strength of their tongue, plays a role. Their airway, did something happen to their nose and it further obstruct the nasal breathing? All these things can be dynamic and shift as we age, and especially for women, it's really important. So a lot of people in the sleep community are trying to sound the alarm for women that as we go through perimenopause and then postmenopause, how much more our likelihood of developing sleep apnea and or upper airway resistance syndrome really goes up as we age. So it becomes super, super important, because often those symptoms might look a little bit different than the traditional symptoms we might think of. So commonly people say, oh, well, of course, it's loud snoring, you're overweight, you've got a big neck, you've got all these certain things that people might think about, but that does not have to be the case for every person that does get diagnosed with sleep disorders. And I think it's an exciting time. People might have seen that Apple Watch has come out with the ability to detect, it's not diagnostic, but can at least raise red flags about the possibility that you might have sleep apnea. And some of our wearable trackers can, if you know what to look for, can be representative of that you might have a problem. So if we see a lot of wake up ticks throughout the whole course of the night, lots of movement, and then, kind of waking up feeling unrested, waking up with morning headaches, all of this, it becomes really important to test for these things. And so many people have some of these disorders. So expect to see a lot more there. But also, last thing, there's so many exciting treatments for sleep apnea that are now on the market that a lot of people might have no idea about, including like daytime treatments. Like the Excite OSA is a treatment for your tongue that you use about 20 minutes a day. Like there's a lot of different things that are now available in case people are like, well, I'm not going to wear the Darth Vader mask. There's other things you can do.
Absolutely.
How do people find you if they want to
Sleep
dig
is a
in
skill.
more? And how do we find you and tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So sleepisaskill.com can act as a place for lots of things. So there you can take our sleep assessment and, get targeted answers and support back right away based on whatever you're dealing with your sleep. We have sleep cohorts. So we have one coming up in January. And that one does require an Oura ring or it's highly suggested to have an Oura ring to be a part of that one, just to get max value out of that. We have one-on-ones there. What we do with people is do lots of blood work. We test for sleep disorders, commonly look at things like mold, metals, and beyond. Look at full assessment of your sleep environment, take lots and lots of steps to ensure that we're really, really optimizing for great sleep for you. And those are some of the ways people can work with us, but we also have lots of free things available, a weekly newsletter. We have a weekly podcast and trying to put out more social media stuff, even if it's about losing my blue blockers, but
That's amazing. So sleep is a skill. We know you got to go.
Yes.
But I just want to leave off with this because I know you're a big hero and champion for us at the DNA company.
Oh.
We just wrapped recently a sleep study, 4,481 participants. So genetic analysis that revealed suboptimal profiles in clock, BDNF, 5-HTTLPR, and the GST families. And here's what will blow you away. So we did all the lifestyle recommendations that you're obviously,
Sure.
huge advocate of.
Yeah.
Some supplements, the lower hanging fruit like magnesium and omega-3, some adaptogens and so forth. But the outcomes, so there was a greater than 10% subjective improvement, but the wearable data combined with subjective data, we had 70% of participants reporting a significant better sleep within 3 weeks of the targeted intervention. So there you go.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'll share them.
Yes, exactly. That's so good. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for getting this, out into the world because it can make such a difference.
Sleep is a skill. Thank you, Mollie. We appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you, Mollie.
Okay.
We appreciate
Have a great rest of the night.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.
Take care. So she's amazing. She's so, by the way, she go on, I don't know. She's just such a wealth of information on everything sleep. And you heard it from her own story. When somebody's motivated and dealing with an ailment, themselves and end up cracking the code like that, as she has, kudos to her for pretty phenomenal. Should we get to answering some questions?
I think we should. Yeah.
And
we might even be able to reference some more of the study data to, again, I think a lot of people have heard some basic information about lifestyle, but it never hurts to hear it again, because if you're not implementing it, then you haven't heard it deep enough to actually understand it's the application. It's not just knowing it, it's doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and by the way, you and I are incredibly proud about, the extension, the line extension, the suite of offerings that go beyond just the genetic testing that we offer at DNA Company, because we've been able to crack the code on some, I would never refer to them as insomniacs, that's a different level, but people with sleep challenges. And we don't use this concept or slogan lightly, by the way, change the day you die, because I think we truly are adding years, healthy years, health span at the very least, but years to people's lives, informed by genetics, informed by their DNA. But this line extension I'm referring to, the microbiome, which is so related, the gut-brain connection, and the lymphatics. So the reason why, by the way, a lot of folks that have had their DNA 360 done that are with us tonight will know that we report detoxification capabilities within the sleep report. How does that make sense? It makes absolute sense, because this goes beyond the brain. It goes beyond your melatonin, serotonin cycle, day-night cycle. Sleep, is something that's affected by the digestive system more than most people realize. So we now study the microbiome. drugs. You might be on certain drug medications that have certain classifications that are contraindicated for you. That means they're not good for you. They're causing the sleep disruption. I found that in so many of my patients. So we offer this pharmacogenomics panel, and the PGX can tease out this drug. And by the way, supplement is no good for you based on your DNA. So we're doing that as well. And then what's really neat to see is, as we in this study, a huge cohort there had also done sort of this bookended pre and post methyl clock, the DNA aging, right? Which is how we judge, how many functional chronological versus calendar versus biological years. So biological years you've added to your life after intervention. So that went up for people that were able to master their sleep. And I just want to say, before we get into answering the questions, the DNA Talks Digest drops tomorrow. This is huge. There's a ton of specials from us, from our strategic partners, focused on all kinds of different health concerns, but sleep is a big focus for us at all times. That's why we have a separate siloed sleep report in our DNA 360.
So for those of you who don't remember, we started a digest or a magazine, an online magazine. We had the first volume go out last quarter. So the second one goes out tomorrow. It is free. It's free for you, being a webinar participant, being a 360 participant. You're going to want to go to the DNA Company website tomorrow, sign up to get that. There's lots of great data in there and lots of great things that'll just move you forward in your total health journey. And it's super exciting to see that we're going to start having that come every quarter. And it's just, we're getting so many, we've got over 30,000 clinicians and practitioners that are working with us, and we're pulling from those and the in-house providers. I mean, it's just super exciting.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. And the only other thing I was going to throw in there is that there are some major program shifts that are occurring. And, just people that are here, tell your friends, tell your family, you have to keep listening and tuning in, because we have a DNA for women product that's coming out, and a specific allocation to a genetic test for women exclusively. And, we know we have the data. We know that you guys are, you ladies are the caregivers of the home and your family, your extended family, your nuclear family. And that's something that probably won't ever change. For us guys, we have to have our head cut off or maybe bleeding from an orifice before we take our health really seriously. So we do rely on you. And I suppose that's one way we're giving back. So we do have a very cool product focused toward women that's coming out soon. There's a question from a Nancy, who's, it sounds pretty complex, but let's go through it. She's describing having narcolepsy, which of course, when you sleep out of the blue during the day, you just fall asleep, and sleep apnea, which, by the way, in the literature, it's, shown that with chronic, higher stage sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, that narcolepsy is a side effect. I'm not saying that's her case. Anyway, she gets energy late at night, and has been staying up until 3 a.m. or so, but lately having some more and more trouble staying asleep. She does the CPAP, that's the forced airway, and lots of sleepiness during the day that she blames on narcolepsy. Is going to sleep so late making things worse? My 2 cents, by the way, before I hand it over to you, Dr. Nielsen, I see this all the time in sleep deprivation, narcolepsy or otherwise, that chronic cortisol, and by the way, adrenaline is, and this really would factor in as it relates to mood and behavior testing we do, but they have an inverse cortisol shift. You're supposed to wake up with a high cortisol and kind of mitigate that throughout the day and wean off prepared for sleep. These individuals, the way that Nancy's describing herself, has this reversed cortisol. So what that means is it wakes up fatigued, improper sleep, improper ability to detoxify, and lymphatics are not working optimally, the adrenal system, this is the HPA axis, we refer to this as, so the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, where you're low cortisol, and then all of a sudden at the end of the day into the evening, that ramps up, adrenal function goes up. So bottom line, this might be a case, and this is informed by genetics and often pharmacogenetics, that an adaptogen timed at the right part of the day That is to say, something botanical that can help lower cortisol and help reshift. If I'm correct, there's some 4-point cortisol tests you can do by saliva, which are really helpful. But what's your 2 cents on that, Dr. Seth?
Well, I'm going to approach it a little bit more medical, coming from a pharmacy's perspective. So I guess my first question for Nancy is, if you have a diagnosis of narcolepsy, have they treated you with any of the traditional medications? There are stimulants, there are serotonin SSRIs or SNRIs. There's a lot of class of drugs. Have you been treated with any of those, and have any of those helped? Okay. Second thing is, with your CPAP, how often have you checked your CPAP to see the efficacy of your CPAP? Are you reading it monthly? Or are you reading it quarterly? Are you using it? And is it effective with your using it? I would also agree with what Bryce said, that if nobody has checked your cortisol, then we've got to look. Again, cortisol should go up in the morning, and then it should come down all the rest of the day. If you're getting that dose at night, are you on any kind of steroids? Are you on stimulants that's raising your cortisol at night? So you go into that night owl type things. What are you eating that is stimulating? So I think there's a lot more to look at, and you may have looked at this, but if nobody has looked, if you haven't been on pharmaceuticals, that may be something to look at. If you've been on some that haven't been effective, then you need to get back with your doctor to look at more. When was your last CPAP checked? Have they looked at your cortisol? Have they looked at your hormones? And what cycles? I see you say you're staying up till 3 or so. Can you even get to bed a little bit earlier? Do you have a very dark room? Is it cool? Are you staying off of TVs and computers and cell phones? So there's a lot to this that I don't know that we're going to be able to cover, but hopefully some of those suggestions, if you haven't tried them yet, could be something to add to your recommendation or to look at.
Yeah. I started with saying it's a pretty complex case. We have just, so many incredible clinicians, obviously, including yourself, Dr. Nielsen, who can help out with this. So be getting in touch with the DNA company and scheduling an appointment to get a deep dive into this. I wholeheartedly recommend that's your way forward, Nancy, because we'll tease it apart. And again, informed by your DNA. And it might be a situation where pharmacogenomics is really helpful as well. Carol's asking, deep sleep versus REM. I understand both are important, but if you had to cut short one, would it be REM? Yeah, I mean, look, I think both are important, and we heard it from Mollie. That's a tough question, but I would suggest, at least again, this is my opinion, the deep sleep, which is also known, by the way, as slow wave, right? So there's all kinds of different characteristics of this architecture, but it's the most physically restorative stage of sleep. And it occurs primarily in the first half of the night, as we heard from Mollie saying, because it's characterized in a way that, again, we kind of describe this as pushing the big red reset button. It's these slow brain waves, your heart rate reduces, minimal body activity, lymphatics are at their peak performance. By the way, you need stage 3 and 4, which is think about this like steps, right? Going down from stage 1, 2, 3, 4 is the deepest. Then you bounce up into this REM, rapid eye movements. Your eyes going bonkers. You're moving around in your bed as well, and having, dreams. And that's not as deeply restorative. The lymphatics are not as active in that stage of sleep, but it does play a different role. So I'm always going to say, without being a sleep scientist, I'm always going to say, yeah, you'd want to maybe cut back on the REM if you had to choose. But I think what Mollie was saying, which is really impactful, really it struck a chord with me, which is your body in any given day, and depending on the stress, physical, mental, emotional, or all three, is going to decide for you. It's literally you providing the sleep hygiene and the workup to being able to get yourself into that optimal state of sleep. and then it's going to decide for you versus your alarm. And if you're going to set an alarm, by the way, and here's something I also learned from Mollie, is you set the alarm that reminds you of the time it is that you start shutting off all the blue light, shutting off the TV and all the screens, maybe reading a book by very dim, low lumen, low lux light, getting yourself prepared, and then another alarm maybe half an hour later to remind you, that now it's time to shut her down. That's the more important alarm than the alarm that, you're setting to wake up in the morning.
Now, I love that you say that, because I know that it's supposed to be the low light, but those of us who have a little bit older eyes, that 55 and above, we're like, but I can't see the book, And so one of the things to think about is listen to a book on tape, listen to music, listen to a calming lecture. Now, you may not want to listen to politics, that kind of thing. But if you can't read by a dim light, then you can still use your ears to hear. And whether it is listen to a movie, listen to a podcast, listen to something that is soothing, listen to, something else, or just listen to some wonderful music, whether it is ocean sounds, whether it is classical, something that when we talk about your whole sleep hygiene, we know that you're getting light in the morning. We know the sun goes down, you need to go down. We know that your room needs to be cool and extremely dark. You should not have clocks that you can see the times and the hours. You should not have, plugins that have things that illuminate. All those have to be covered up if you truly don't want, because even when your eyes are shut, all those light are irritating the sensory in the back of your head. So really important that it's cool and dark. Try not to eat within 2 hours of lying down to avoid the regurgitation, to avoid the problems with the digestion. So putting some of that in place, you're going to find that you're going to have a better night's sleep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by the way, I went on a little bit about like the deep sleep and phase 3 and 4. I don't think either of them should be compromised or cut back on. But if you had to choose, but just to make sure that we're clear about what REM does for us, REM is really that vital component for sleep, or for rather memory consolidation, learning, emotional processing and things like that. Helps regulate mood and reduce stress. So the deep stuff is for clearing, preventing cognitive decline on a different level, and helping recover. That's the biggest thing. Recover from the day before. Nothing like sleep. You can't otherwise recover physically, neurologically as well, brain wise, unless you sleep. So yeah, I don't think either of them should be compromised.
And Donna makes a good point. Sleep masks are great. I've had a few sleep masks, but then they leave marks on me. So I actually have a very soft, moldable pillow, and I sleep with that pillow over my face. And it's not a weighted blanket-ish, though there are weighted ones, but I sleep with 3 pillows. I have a very firm one under my neck that helps keep my neck back. I don't know if you guys can see up into my upper palate. I have an expander because I actually did a sleep study because I was snoring, and I didn't have obstructive airway disease, but I had non-obstructive, which was causing problems. So with that problems, I end up using mouth tape. I've actually had my palate expanded. I've expanded it 8 millimeters. Now my nose is open. I can breathe. What a big difference it is to be able to breathe at night and to breathe through my nose to get up into my brain. If your hormones aren't balanced, if you're breathing through your mouth, that's not helping. Close that, get some of the mouth tape, breathe through your nose. A lot of people have allergies and everything's closed down, whether you need to use a nasal spray, whether you need to use a decongestant. When you're breathing through your nose and getting more oxygen in your brain, you do go into a deeper sleep. And yeah, I really love what Mollie said about don't be so worried about the perfect numbers. It's more, do you feel better in the morning?
Yep, waking up ready to conquer the day. Now that we're sort of showing our anatomy, and our various defects or improved. Look at this, and this is not a commercial for them at all. But look at this. Both my nares collapse. I have a nasal septal defect, right? So I have to, and I've worn and I can get surgery, but I choose not to. But I wear those Breathe Right strips.
Yep.
That open. If I don't, I have non-obstructive snoring as well, but it's nasal snoring, not palatine snoring. But I honestly, if which I'm clearly away right now in a hotel, if I'm at a hotel and I've forgotten my Breathe Right strips, I'm going to a CVS and I'm buying them. I will refuse to sleep without them because they open my nose, and otherwise I'm breathing through my mouth and snoring. It's terrible.
Cindy, I use the Sominex ones. I've found that I like them, one, because they're clear, two, because there is a little small slit, so it's not just the tape. And so if I was panicky at first, oh my gosh, what if I can't breathe? Because like you, I got hit in the face. I have a deviated septum, but it's interesting, especially because we're older. When they went in, I thought that I would just get the deviated septum fixed. They said, well, you have fallen vaults and you have large turbinates. So they wanted to do turbinectomy, and then they wanted to do the deviation. They said, you might as well get a nose job while you're at it. And $25,000 later, I said, I don't think so. And so I've had this expansive dental work done, and I used Breathe Right for a while. Now I don't have to. But I found with the mouth tape, I've even learned to reposition my tongue so that I don't even have to use it all the time. Now, I don't know Dr. Lyo's technology about the deviated septum, but I'd be interested in learning more about that. I have not had a problem. I've tried 2 or 3 others. Surgical tape that actually is easy to tear also works, and you can put 2 right here. But I find that leaves a lot of tape residue on me. And it's harder to do my lipstick and stuff. I like moist lips.
That's funny.
It's a girl vanity thing.
That's funny. We have a question from Joanna about the Oura Ring and sleep data. And I think, in part we were kind of answering that is don't overly rely on these things. It is more about how you wake up feeling well and rested. And some of these sleep scores, I think, are kind of bogus anyway. But there's been a lot of studies done on the Oura Ring. The one that comes to mind is Women's Hospital, Brigham Women's Hospital. They looked at they somehow somewhere near 80% in correlation or in agreement, at least, with a polysomnography, which is a sleep study, a 4-stage sleep classification. So it's pretty good. I think, and I don't know if you can see this, but my Apple Watch, I think it does more. I was saying this years ago when Apple was decidedly in the sleep space, was just kind of came that way this year. They were going to kick butt against Oura, and they have. So what I'm getting at is they now, although like an EKG, single lead EKG, my watch can do for me, and I can send a PDF to my doctor. But in the same way, they have sleep apnea scores. They can detect sleep stages. They can detect sleep apnea, of course, snoring, all kinds of things. So anyway, I'm just sort of more an Apple Watch fan, but I think if you prioritize detailed sleep tracking, this is sort of my bottom line, and not overly or putting all your eggs into one basket, I think the Apple Watch stands out as the more versatile option versus a ring that's dedicated to that. I mean, the Apple Watch does a million other things. That's my opinion anyway.
Now, I'm going to ask you another question. Do you think having electronic devices on you and having EMFs in the house, whether it's Wi-Fi or whatever, disturbs you?
Absolutely. So Dr. Magda Havis, is a physician, PhD, doing research here at Women's College Hospital. I say here, I'm actually currently in Florida, but I live and reside in Toronto, Canada. So Women's College Hospital in Toronto. Magda Havis, Dr. Davis. I've spoken to a lot of these experts in the EMF space. and Chris Carlo, back in the day before, I think he was kind of maybe, I don't know, lost a little bit of credibility in some regards. Not Chris, sorry, George Carlo. Bottom line is, yes, I think we're bioelectric beings. I think that there's probably some things that it's upsetting. So here's what, again, Oura is always on. The Apple Watch, I track my sleep by turning the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth off. I will never sleep with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi near my head. By the way, just so you know, we have all the detectors at home, and without sounding kooky, this thing, when it is on the Bluetooth, this thing emits more nonsense than one of these. It's insane. I won't have it by my head while it's on. But I like tracking my sleep. And then when I wake up off of my wrist, by the way, I'll have it communicate with my phone and download all the data.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
I'm operating off of my my iPad here, so it's a little clumsy. So I'm just going to try to pull in the next question here, which is Deborah, and she's asking, how do you manage sleep habits with the change of seasons? So like winter, reduced light during the day, summer is longer periods of light. Really hate going to work in the dark. I hate, I've never been SAD, but I'm just so annoyed when it comes to this time of year when at 5 o'clock it's pitch dark outside. I just get grumpy. So I don't know, maybe it's like in my aging that this has happened. This is again why my comment earlier on was like I default to biological evolution, like an anthropological sciences, epidemiological. We're not meant to live north of 40. Sorry. I mean, I get it. No matter where you are, it's getting darker earlier because we have an axis. The Earth turns on that axis. But something about it turning dark anywhere around the 6 or 7 o'clock hour. It's supposed to be dark at like 8 or 9. And then get light at 6. That's the ideal time frame for me. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, I think of course we have challenges depending on where we live in latitude, right? I mean, I guess that was a rhetorical question, but do you have any recommendations for that or for her in that?
Well, I think we addressed them earlier where there are light sources that you can get, the vitamin D light sources that you can have in your house. There are the SAD lights. So for the seasonal affect to give you the light during the day and then, shut them off at night. And I think you have to, when we look at the optimal, 6 to 8 hours, I love how Mollie said, pick a time that you need to wake up. Pick that and do that consistently. Because even the hour with the time change and how it throws people off and the increased number of car accidents, the increased number of deaths that happen that next day because that 1 hour threw people off. Get on a consistent schedule. So yeah, let's go back and review. Consistent schedule, key. And I love set an alarm, not just to wake up, set an alarm to shut down. Okay, let's see. It's, 7:15 where people are. It's probably about time, 7:15, maybe 8, start shutting down. And so by 9:30, I know that seems so early for some people, but that's when the body's supposed to shut down. When you look at anthropologically, we're not supposed to be up till 10, 11, 12, whatever. So shutting down by that 8, 9, 10, and having that quiet time, whether it's reading, whether it's listening to music, whether it is taking a warm bath. I mean, all those lovely things that are good self-care. And then when your body gets into that rhythm, part of it is getting into a rhythm. When do we go to bed? When do we wake up? And consistency. Consistency is the key in food. Consistency is the key in exercise. Consistency is the key with your thoughts. Maybe you journal. Maybe this is a great time. Remember, she said the REM cycle was really like the inner therapist. What's bothering you? Get it off and get it written down so that it can be off the brain. A lot of people will keep a notebook next to them. So if they wake up with a problem, they write it down knowing they've got that and they can let it go out of their head and they can get back. If I wake up in the middle of the night, I go into a meditation. I have some meditation tapes and I will if I wait a few minutes and kind of rest and kind of relax and I can't get back down, I'll put on a meditation. Some of them last 20 minutes, some of them last 45 minutes. And I'll tell you, by the end, I'm like, I am done, click it off. And then 2 hours later, I wake back up.
Yeah.
I feel extremely refreshed. So, those are some of the insight timers or some of the other guided meditations may be a great way for you to have something to listen to
Yeah.
decompress.
I love it. And they're all free apps that are available that can do this for you. And
Mhm.
you don't have to go as deep as sort of like Louise Hay style and focus on every single organ and shut down every muscle fiber in your body. But, 5, 10, 15 minutes will do for most people. When you say, this unnatural time to bed, 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning for a lot of people, it reminds me of a lot of the work done in this space on night shift workers. That's the antithesis of ideal circadian rhythm, of course. And I think this starts back in, like, I remember reading studies back from the early 80s, Kodak, when we used to actually print our pictures, that these were night workers, and they did that mainly because, picture or film development had to happen at night. Anyway, and all the way up until more recently, like melatonin, which of course, again, is a hormone produced by the pineal gland that regulates the sleep-wake cycle, was found very low, significantly reduced in these individuals that had, the night shift. And what they found in these preliminary studies now have been further evidenced is that because of that lack of melatonin as one of the driving factors, altered sleep patterns, and for other reasons, we know lymphatics, et cetera, increased risks of certain cancers, particularly breast cancer. It's quite staggering, but other things like cardiovascular disease, metabolic diseases, type 2 diabetes, etc., gastrointestinal problems, depression. It's a long bloody list, when you get into the circadian rhythm upset, particularly from night shift workers. And by the way, it kind of like segues nicely into our next question, which is Lorna's asking about taking 5-HTP, 50 milligrams, before bed to help her sleep at night. Is this supplement safe to take daily? My DNA results say my gene clock, or I think she means clock gene, is suboptimal. So you know what? Maybe just quick brief the biology or the biochemistry pathway, so people understand this. So from the amino acid tryptophan, we make 5-hydroxytryptophan. And by the way, believe it or not, methylation in some indirect ways, the B complex family of vitamins, B2, B6, pyridoxine, and B12 play a role here in this conversion, tryptophan to 5-hydroxytryptophan. But then 5-hydroxytryptophan converts into melatonin at night. So that's the precursor. And I found with my patients that, sometimes tryptophan, by the way, this is the work of Dr. Craig Hudson, who switched out like half of his practice. He's a psychiatrist, from benzodiazepines, and put them, this is hundreds and hundreds of patients, and put them on tryptophan. They got off their benzos and they did just as well or better on tryptophan. So some people do better on tryptophan because it'll convert downstream. Some people do better at 5-hydroxytryptophan, and yet other people do better with melatonin. That's been my personal experience. But particularly a 5-HTTLPR, TPH2, which is tryptophan hydroxylase, the gene that encodes for the enzyme that breaks down and converts tryptophan, and the clock gene. In particular, if those three genes are amok, I have found, or let's call it poor variation, I found that 5-hydroxytryptophan in the morning to upregulate serotonin, and then again at night, half an hour before intended sleep time, is a beautiful combo with B6 for these patients. I don't know what your experience has been.
Well, I was going to say that's good. The only caution I would say is if someone is on antidepressant, an SSRI, SNRI, be very careful because you're going to start monkeying with that.
Sure.
So if you're not on something for mood elevation or stimulation, then I think that's a great idea. Again, one of the things to think about or to work with your practitioner is, is it that you're having trouble falling asleep? Is it that you're having trouble staying asleep? Is it that your mind is going around and around and around? Is it that you just wake up and your cortisol has all of a sudden popped? We don't have just our clock genes in our brain. We have it in every organ. So if you're doing detox, say detox on the liver, then guess what? When that liver wakes up between 2 and 3 and is doing a bunch of big cleaning according to the Chinese traditional Chinese medicine clock, a lot of times people will wake up then because their liver needs detoxification, or it is doing detoxification, and it's a way for the body to go, hey, I need to clean this up. We may need to look at some liver detox or some gut detox. So part of these are your hormones shifting. Part of it is your lifestyle shifting. Part of it is your diet shifting. Part of it is, do you have enough light, and not just light in a room, but outside? Do you have enough dark, and dark where you can hibernate and really sleep deeply? These are little things, but they all stack up. When Mollie was talking about a sleep stack, part of what she was talking about was supplements. Are you taking some GABA? Are you taking some melatonin? Phosphatidylserine for, right before bed is also great. Tulsi tea is a very gentle sleep. Some of the medicinal mushrooms that are mixed with cacao and magnesium biglycinate, you can have a cup of cocoa or a cup of tea before bed, and that will really relax the body and get you into a sleep mode. Those are all, you can see it's not just one thing. It's not just boom. So as we're adding all of these things up to ease yourself into that gentleness. And then the next thing I'd say is just be careful. Be careful and be gentle with yourself. Are you going through a short-term problem sleeping? Has this been a long-term sleeping? Have you honestly tried things, or have you said, yeah, but my phone doesn't bother me? Even if on your phone you can do the blue light blocker, on here you can turn it on and you can have the blue light where it buffers there, plus you've got blue light in your glass blocker, so maybe you do, whether it's your computer, if you're on the computer all day, get the screens on them so you're blue light blocking during the day, so that when you get to night, you're not trying to undo everything you've done all day. It is a stack. It is layers, and it can be several layers, but you can get there, and be gentle on yourself so that you don't give up.
Yeah, good, awesome points. We have a question about cold weather. Can I substitute a full spectrum light if I cannot go outside? Yeah, I think so. I think Mollie substantiated that as well. Dirk is asking, are there any genetic adaptations to circadian rhythm in people indigenous to the Arctic Circle? You know what? That's interesting. I don't know. I can't quote any particular ones, but these genes, the nature of DNA and its ability to retain variations, which is what we study. Now, there's no right or wrong. I mean, some of these variations exist for good reasons. Poor detox is a good example. So is ApoE, having a 4 variant, 34444, used to be favorable. It takes time for our environment to decide whether or not in the majority of the population, certain variations percolate to the top as favorable. But I'd imagine that's probably more tens of thousands of years before, that kind of, in a natural selection capacity, kind of pops into a discernible variation on their clock gene or whatever else is going on. But I don't know for sure. Do you know of any studies that show adaptations in circadian rhythm?
I haven't looked for any.
I know, because he's making a point. Like, these are people that experience all day light for many months and then all day darkness for many months, and they don't have technology for them. I mean, at least they haven't had, maybe in the last 15, 20 years they do, but they certainly don't have SAD lights in their in the majority of those environments up there, as far as I know, anyway. Julia's asking, when should you eat the last meal before sleeping? Mind gut, brain gut, right? I mean, when this is active, right? There's the vagus nerve connection. So, my suggestion is going to always be about 3, maybe even 4 hours. Like late night, especially heavy snacking, things that take a lot of juices, if you will. Liver has to overperform, gastric juices are performing, pancreas is performing. Forget about the blood sugar spike or any of that. It's literal digestive juices, and when the gut's moving and peristalsis is going, it's going to affect the brain. That's why, your grandma said, don't eat before bed or you'll get nightmares, right? I mean, that's right. That's what happens, an overactive gut. I don't know. Is there anything you'd add to that?
No, I think a minimum 2 hours, 2 to 4 is great. I mean, if you look at a lot of people, they try to eat by 5:36 and then bedtime ends up being, 8:39. So I think that's
Right.
all.
And the same person's asking about napping. She never napped. And the last year, she's accrediting menopause to this. I cannot go without a mid-afternoon nap. This is where, again, sleep architecture is interesting and you have to understand it. This whole get your 8 hours, by the way, that comes from studying sleep architecture. So it's an average blanket statement. It's not true for everybody because there are very few, but there are people that the literature supports only needs 4 or 5 hours and they get it all done. But point is, back of the napkin, cowboy math, that stage 1, 2, 3, 4 bounce up into REM. We need to go through, and it changes slightly. There's more REM, as you heard about for Mollie, and we're reiterating in the last couple of minutes. More REM toward the latter part of your sleep, more deep 3 and 4 stage in the first half of your sleep. But let's call it on average, that's a cycle. You have to go through 4 to 5 of those cycles every night for optimal health. And the way this goes is that it takes the average person 60 to 90 minutes, closer to 90 minutes actually, to go through a full cycle. So if you do the quick math, it's about 8 hours, 90 minutes at 4 to 5 of those cycles. That's where it comes from. But here's the point as it relates to napping. As long as you don't interrupt that cycle. So sleep, this is called the trucker's nap. Sleeping longer than 20 minutes, and you're running the risk even during the day of getting into your first cycle for that 24-hour period. So what happens, sleep scientists realize, is that you're possibly robbing from your full sleep architecture at night. So don't do it longer than the 15, 20-minute nap so as to not bleed into your full sleep cycle so that you don't interrupt your night. That's what I know to answer that question anyway. And then what else do we have here? I don't know about this. You for sure would know about what is Sunosi for narcolepsy. That helps her somewhat. This was Nancy.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know.
It is one of the treatments that they're using, and we don't need to get into all the data on it, but the fact that she's got that starting, there's quite a few clinical studies that show that can help, and I see what she says, it does help somewhat.
Yeah.
It's
and then how to check
solrimetrol. Sunosi is the trade name, but it's like solrimetrol.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a once day to promote awakening.
Oh, it's in the day you take it.
Right.
Right. Oh yeah, of course. I mean, preventing that that immediate. There's that. I can't remember all of the narcolepsy is a rare condition, so I just don't see any of it in my own practice. That's the questions. I think what we should do is just remind folks before we sign off tonight that the DNA Talks Digest drops tomorrow. Tons of specials from us at the DNA company, discounts, etc., as well as from our partners. And I love the way you described, the DNA Digest. So for everyone who doesn't know, we're doing a publication now, and it's just filled with incredible information, but also often some promotional stuff. And that we're doing this major program shift. You got to keep tuning in to these webinars. Tell your friends and family. We're doing a DNA for Women product and a genetic test. So that's coming down the pipe. I don't know. It's 7:30. I can't believe it's 7:30 already, but
I'm just going to answer 2 more quick things. Nancy, to get your cortisol done through your PCP, so that you can either do like a saliva test, it would be a good idea. Or you can do work again with a GYN or somebody that can do a Dutch test. So you get all your hormones plus, your cortisol to see if you've got a flat curve. They can work with you on that. We actually provide that if you want to work with one of our practitioners. And then for Kate, the best way to handle jet lag, Bryce was talking about 1 to 3 milligrams of melatonin for every 50 pounds of body weight at the time that about 30 minutes to an hour before you want to go to sleep. I also take a portable PEMF device and put it on the ultra low frequency so that it puts my nervous system into a parasympathetic relax and regenerate. So, or if I land and it's morning, then I can do a stimulatory getting up and go. So I carry PEMF and melatonin when I travel.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, I use PMF as well. That stands for pulsed electromagnetic frequency. And I use it also on that lower setting every night. Of course, can sort of punch through your mattress, right? So I've got a topper, and but I put it under I don't feel it, and it's this big. There's so many technologies out there. I happen to like, it's a class 2 medical device. I like the one that is put out by Beamer, which is the for whatever it's worth. A lot of people are skeptical of MLM companies. It's an MLM company. I don't represent them, but the technology is all I care about, and their science. And I feel like that's one of the better ones out there. I think we should also thank Mollie again for joining us. She's not here anymore with us tonight, but thank you to Mollie for such an enlightening discussion on the science and art of sleep optimization. Sleepisaskill.com. Sleep truly is a skill. And it's clear from that conversation that there's hope for everyone here to achieve a better sleep with the right tools and insights. And we provide that insight at the DNA Company with our DNA 360 and our sleep siloed report. We have a whole report on sleep. So if you want to learn more about Mollie's work, sleepisaskill.com. We are at, of course, the DNAcompany.com. And don't forget to, check out some of the other extension of our testing into the gut microbiome, the gut 360, the pharmacogenomics, the DNA aging. Look at your calendar versus biological age. Some cool testing around liquid biopsy and cancer predisposition, non-diagnostic, but flags to get further checked. So that's it for tonight. Amazing spending time with you, Dr. Nielsen.
Thank you. Always amazing to be with you. Dirk, I love that you're always here. It is so great to see you, to have such wonderful practitioners that join us regularly, to have such wonderful customers and clients that join us wonderfully. It is a highlight of our week to get to share with you and to interact with you, and we just love you dearly. So as we enter into these holiday seasons, may your families be blessed. Remember, this is not a time to come off of your diet, your lifestyle. It's a chance to stay strong and show others why you are so committed to your health. Yes, you can indulge. Yes, you can have exceptions, but don't make from now until February an exception and then have to restart next year. Just, make sure you stay on top of it so you stay healthy, happy, blessed, and we're so blessed to have you here.
Absolutely. Excellent way to end off. Thanks, Doc.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Right,
God bless.
Cheers.